In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Scouser Tommies on the day that, well, we're recording it on the day that a dark cloud descended over the other half of Liverpool. That's not even a full half, is it? But the other side of the park, at least. The day that Everton got told they were going to be docked 10 points and they were right down in the bottom three, ahead of the bottom side only on goal difference. But it's also the end of the week where we're almost halfway through the international break, and at least Liverpool went into it with a 3-0 win. So, you know, the clouds on our side of the park are pretty non-existent. We can just see the ones over the way. But it's been one of those times, an international break. You think, what are we going to talk about? We talk about the last game, then you kind of like, what are we going to talk about next? But as we always say, there's always Everton, and they've done us a favour again. So it's the big news right now. And I mean, we're also recording this as an international match is going on, but that's how interested we are. It's England, so we might as well record this instead. But I mean, I think it's probably worth starting though, isn't it, on the Everton stuff, Jay? They did the usual thing, even without, by the sounds of it, the way they're talking, the way that they're claiming all this sort of innocence and everything. That's how it feels to me, anyway. I get they're going to be gutted by losing 10 points, but it's not that much to lose in the grand scheme of things. It's not even. It's not even like 4 defeats. I'm sure they're capable of having 4 on their own anyway. But to me, it sounds like they're trying to sort of get out of it. They're trying to come up with all these excuses, and in reality, they just need to face up like they do sometimes in a game of footy that they've done wrong. Just face it and get on.
Yeah, the gift that keeps on giving. In the festive time of year. Yeah, as you say, I think they probably lost more points under Frank Lampard's stewardship, and by this point of the season, they probably weren't even on that many when they last had him in charge. But yeah, I will give a quick surmise. I don't think it'll actually affect them too much, and I don't think it'll be 10 points because they've appealed it. There was a report earlier on this week, that it could have been 12. It ended up being 10. I get a feeling that it may be reduced to more nearer to 6. If we're holding any sort of criminal comfort with Everton, it's one charge and they've been slapped with 10 points, and there's a club, down the M62 there with 115 charges that they've yet to be actually answered for. Does that mean they're going to face, 1,150 point deduction? Unlikely. But, it does beg the question as to, well, how long are they going to investigate and, take this process of actually doing something with City, and then what will be the outcome of that? Evertonians do feel a lot of the time like the world's against them. Yes, the excuses will be banded out as to, why is it happening to us? Why now? We were on a good run of form and you've slapped us with 10 points. Let's be honest here, if they win the next game and the other 3 teams in the bottom 3 don't, which is highly likely at this good form, They're at home to Man United as well. We must add Everton, so it's quite possible they do win that game. They'll be back out the bottom three, and Everton will be fine for them again. But yeah, it's it kind of is. It's quite laughable that it's happened to them as a club. But yes, the charges were there. The proof was out. They overspent, and sort of, if you commit the crime, you've got to do your time, sort of thing, and face your punishments. And if this is what it's going to be for times going forward for clubs, financially doping or financially breaching rules and regulations, then I'm sure there's a lot of people in high paid positions at high profile clubs sat looking around the room now thinking we might need to get ourselves, a bit cleaner than what we are operating, because, football is a business at the end of the day, and they ran their business terribly, and most of the, 99.9% of any other businesses in the world, if they'd done that, would probably be shut down. So maybe they've got off lightly, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering whether there's going to be sort of an element of Man City and Chelsea, I don't know, sort of quiet little mouthpiece type people who, the people who kind of just like leak things and nudge people a certain way in the media. They're going to be sort of pushing to say they think he's harsh too, because obviously, yeah, they're going to, if that, as you say, if that is a measure of what you get for that level of getting it wrong, then it could increase more. I mean, it could be based on the money. I think the upper limit's 105 million. That's in the space of 3 years of a loss. And in the end, Everton were found to be 19.5 million over. So roughly, what's that? 2 points for every... No, yeah, well, the maths are just gone out of my head. But 20 million, 10 points. Yeah, so if City were over it by 100 million, that could be a lot of points, couldn't it? The thing is as well, City will have 115 charges. It feels like it's going to take forever to get it sorted. And one thing that did my head in a little bit until I read something, it's a 40-page document. I read some of it, don't go all day or all week or all year. It was saying that it's 115 million is sort of, that's the sort of top end. But then there's this thing about the 15 million quid loss is also something that gets the Premier League to pay attention. So that's based on having that much of a loss in those 3 years. Bit of weirdness this time because COVID had some figures averaged out, the COVID year, to let people off with that. But this is the thing that's kind of not been really pushed, I don't think, is that a loss of 15 million means that you get some attention off the Premier League. They then want to get more information off you because these figures come through before you've actually finally declared. This is more of a kind of estimate. They confirm it later. And if you're going to show a loss of that much, Premier League basically want you to prove that you're going to be able to pay all your bills for the next year. Otherwise, trouble comes your way. So that's the first thing. And the judgment actually says that, the target is really aiming to be no loss at all, but they're giving you that sort of 15 million, and then, they keep an eye on you. But after that, you've got this other big jump in money to 105 million. So really, this isn't, everyone's talking about the money being sort of 20 million over, but in a lot of ways they're not. They're £125 million loss. They're trying to make out it's for down to the stadium. But if you can face reading all of that document, there's loads of stuff about how they kept changing the mind. They changed their arguments right before this hearing. They actually admitted before the hearing that they had exceeded it after previously saying they hadn't. They just said they hadn't exceeded it by as much. There's stuff they've done with a loan where they got loans for, I think one of them is based on a lot of clubs do this where they get a loan and it's secured against future TV money and things like that. And they got the loan on the condition that it was for working capital. Now, a lot of this goes over my head. There's other people on Anfield Index who'll understand this a lot more than us. But you sort of say, this is what I want it for. And they admitted that they borrowed the money off these other people for working capital because they knew they wouldn't lend them the money for the stadium. So they're then trying to argue that the money for the stadium was only borrowed because, the other money was only borrowed because they got the stadium. And they're just trying to mix everything up on what they're trying to say. And it feels to me that I don't know. It's just a case of, look, you got caught, and then the most laughable thing in the whole thing, as I'm going through all of this, sort of skimming through all of this, is that they came up with this list of players and values for them. This was going to be the magic thing that was going to get them back in the, back within the rules. These list of players that they'd get decent money for, and a few different ones got mentioned. But right in the middle of it is, they thought they'd get 80 million, not 60 million for Richarlison. So it's almost like, I know they've not said it in so many words, but it's almost as if they're saying, we got ripped off there with Richarlison. I mean, what did Nunes cost? I mean, I think 60 million. And I think Spurs would be thinking they saw us coming there, didn't they?
I mean, yeah, the Spurs would argue that they've the ones who'd been ripped off by paying 60 million for them.
Yeah.
What was it? One goal last season, that famous goal at Anfield that actually meant nothing because they lost the game. Yeah, I think, there's also been from where I am and where I work and stuff like that, the claims that, the Ukraine war has killed them. Well, it killed a lot of Ukrainians as well, if you don't mind asking that one. But yeah, like, you deal with the devil in sort of people like Alicia Usmanov, who I don't know too much about him, but, he made his money through foul means of, oil. Let's just say it's probably the best way of
he's
wording that.
Sanctioned for a reason, isn't he?
Yeah, and was happily, there's a classic meme of, Alicia Usmanov pointing at a wheelie bin, going, I'll give you 5 million for that. Pointing at, a tree outside the ground saying, I'll give you 2 million for that. Like this sort of thing where he was just throwing USM holdings over anything that he could to, try and bend the figures financially by any means of sponsorship. And yeah, that's killed them basically. But you can't rely on dodgy sources of money because the actual rules and regulations sort of aim towards being self-sufficient and self-sustainable. And you look further down the pyramid of football, and there's clubs that have gone out of business because of a smaller micro case of whatever they've actually gone through in terms of an ownership who might not be as clean as a whistle and had financial stream problems is probably the best way to put it, and not being self-sufficient and have ended up folding and ceasing to exist anymore. So it's kind of a bit rich in what some of the claims are. But in saying, yeah, we wanted 80 million for Richarlison, we only got 60, and you put an estimate of values on players who, with all due respect, are nowhere near that. And yeah, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and then borrowing from Paul to then pay, Philip or someone like that. The borrowing money from left, right, and centre to try and cover all these other outgoings. And let's be honest here, the stadium is on its way. But what matters to them is they've got to stay in this league to, financially ensure that stadium gets finished and, can sort of be paid off in what it's going to cost, because it is going to be state of the art and it's got the potential to be really good. Right? It's got the potential to be, a rival to the likes of Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which is state of the art, and okay, it won't attract such things like the NFL and major boxing and, music concert events like the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium does, but it will attract certain things. But financially, its day-to-day running will be a football ground, and if they ended up down in the Championship, they're not going to recoup the sort of revenue that they need to ensure that ground is paid off in a realistic amount of time. And they've got help from various sources like the council or whatever, which is a very dark and deep chapter if you wanted to delve into that one of the sponsorship money for that stadium. But it's being built in an area which will help generate jobs and stuff like that, which is why they got some sort of funding. But their end game has got to be to stay in this league, and it's got to be done in a fair and right way, and not be breaking financial rules and not be getting points deductions. And they're not helping themselves, but it's one of them, like they're not going to get any sort of sympathy from the red half of the city, apart from the fact there's other teams who, not just because it might impact us in, potential de facto titles that we may have won. They might get stripped of titles in the likes of Man City, such as Lance Armstrong was stripped of his Tour de France titles, but that won't help us in things that have gone by in the past. We just wanted to, be recognised and fair that, we are doing things as much as we can in a self-sustainable way and trying to keep it on a level playing field. And other clubs around the league are doing that also. But when you've got a small handful of clubs who are quite happily flaunting the rules and want to do things, just to their sort of standards and level that they think no one can touch them, hopefully this now is the barometer, and it's a sign of things to come that, football needs to be done properly and try and made as fair and as equal. It never will be, because obviously the Premier League is a giant upon itself in terms of other European leagues. But let's try and have a league where every week everyone's sort of playing as much as they can on a level playing field, and maybe then it might not be City winning 4 leagues in a row. It might be other teams challenging, and we might actually see other things within the game happening then, and it's time will tell on that one. But for now, the book is fairly slapped at Everton, and I don't think they're quite happy with the book that's been slapped in the face.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's all about bringing money in, and obviously it costs money to make money and all the rest of it. People will tell you that all the time. I mean, one of the things that he said in the judgment, some of the evidence that had come out, was that Everton had said they're going to throw all this money in, then they're going to get themselves in the top 8 with all these new players they've signed, just like that. Being in the top 8 gives you a certain amount of money. I think is it 2.5 million per place in the Premier League. The lower you go down, the more you lose off the sort of Premier League prize money. And they reckon that this is what the kind of business plan was: buy all these players, get themselves into the top 8, get themselves into Europe, then sell the players at a profit and use some of that money to bring more players in. And even that didn't feel like it all added up. Anyone hearing that at the time would have gone, what are you on about? You've not even got yourself there yet, and you're not going to necessarily... I mean, not every club I think lower league clubs might spend 10 million on a player and get 20 million for him by moving him up, someone lower down the league. But if you are in the top 8, you tend not to make profits selling your players to other teams in your league, because they're kind of your competitors. So it just doesn't seem to happen that way. But then another thing, this loss, you're allowed to sort of ignore certain things. So, for example, having an academy, if you've put millions of pounds into your academy every year, you can kind of knock that off because it's considered good for the good of the game. Women's football's another one. If you're spending money on a women's football team, then that can be sort of knocked off. And there's other things like that. But there's this thing called a levy that every time, whatever you spend on transfers, basically, the Premier League wants, I think it's 4% of the transfer fee. And the idea of that is it goes to like a pension fund. Not sure footballers need pensions, but yeah, it goes anyway. Probably, but I mean, it probably is for pensions for all sort of people within the game. But that's it. 4% goes to that. So, if you spend 100 million, that's a fair bit of cash, isn't it? So, Everton tried to say that. Oh, that's it. Sorry, when they've got enough that they need for the pension, anything left over goes to a youth development scheme that the Premier League run. So that's kind of, it's their way, it's for them to do. It's not for each club or anything. They don't give it back to the clubs. Everton claimed that £7.6 million that was taken off them, £7.6 million of the levy that they'd paid on transfers was basically really for youth, because of the Premier League's youth, giving money to youth systems after their pension money's been taken out, which it just feels like they've messed up. So now they're desperately looking round for ways to sort of get it back under the limit. So, I mean, 7.6 million, if that's 4% of what they've sort of spent on transfers, then I'm not going to do the maths now, but that is a hell of a lot of money they've spent on transfers that, that's like, that's just is a crazy amount. And then to try and claim it back this way, it's just full of these strange sort of methods that they've come up with to try and claim that it was for them. And in all honesty, I reckon they've probably come up with gone to a firm of accountants, and they've looked through the rulings, got some lawyers on the case, they've looked through the rulings, and between them, they've tried to cook up some ways to just sort of bend the rules a little bit and hope that it would all work, rather than planning it in advance. And this is the most laughable part to it, is the way that they're now crying that they've been hard done to. The truth is, and I'm not saying that anyone would be any different, but it feels like it's like the national lottery winner or the Peels winner that's just won a load of money, doesn't know what the hell to do with it, just gets all excited, basically pisses it all over the wall, and they have, they sort of have a swimming pool built in the Outer Hebrides or something. They just lose all the money, it's all gone, no sense to it, no advice, and now they're going, oh shit, I can't even buy me tea.
Yeah, they're not going to get many sympathy sort of votes, are they? Because it's a rare case in terms of what amount of teams there is in the country. In Wales football, to be quite honest with you, they were flaunting these sorts of rules. Like, most teams do try and do things legitimately and by the book, without cooking them. Minus the pun there, but the scratching around for excuses. You'd imagine this is what's been happening in the courts and whatever, which was probably handed down the rule on them and stuff, and they've probably been laughed out, and they're now just looking for ways to get out of it, and it does become laughable in terms of oh yeah, but we thought this money was going to their boss, and I'm sorry about this one, but we thought that money was going there, and we thought this other money was going somewhere else, and it does sort of, I don't know what the word is to describe, but it's sort of a bit of a sour grape sort of thing in terms of you've been caught doing what you did. It could have been worse, but you kind of just got to take it on the chin, and after this many years, if you're an Everton fan and you've not realised that things don't always go your way, things kind of just are a bit shit if you're an Evertonian, then I still don't think you really understand what being an Evertonian is, because in the 18 games that Jurgen Klopp has managed against Everton, in the 19 games that Jurgen Klopp has managed against Everton, he's won 18 of them, and against a team that's financially dope, and I think Jurgen Klopp deserves more credit for that.
Yeah.
But it's just one of them things. Now, I think...
Are you that person who has everything? The coolest merch and those must-have fan threads? Well, over at our Anfield Index shop, we've gone that extra mile when it comes to pimping up your Liverpool collection. From our popular range of bespoke design t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies and hats, to our signature edition mugs, prints and coasters, all provided with fast worldwide shipping. We have something for every red. We also stock official LFC merchandise and are licensed with the Premier League and UEFA to sell official iron-on shirt badges and sleeve patches. As a listener to this podcast, you can get 10% off everything with coupon code AIPRO10. Just head over to AnfieldIndex.shop or find us on Etsy by searching for Anfield Index.
It's happened today in an odd time, obviously, because it's the international break, so they've kind of got, a week to digest these things, and a lot of other things are going to come out, and yes, and you're right in probably what you're saying. Other teams who are looking over the shoulder may come out in, messages of support, or media outlets or mouthpieces will probably be saying sort of things like, we don't think that's actually quite so fair. And, Jamie Carragher being one, and I imagine Neville will probably come out unless he's blaming the Glazers for this one. And it allows, a week to bypass, because, it's been strategically sort of placed in terms of when this has been released. That it allows, things to happen but I don't think we're going to hear the end of it. I think, by the time we do another recording next week, there'll be a hell of a lot more sort of detail, and probably a lot more sort of fallout from it. I mean, just the last thing I seen before we started recording was the likes of Leeds, Leicester, and I think Burnley. Even though Burnley are now back in the Premier League, there was a situation, I think, around about 12 months ago where the teams who went down when the accusations first come out about Everton's financial situation, the relegated teams then to the Championship, Burnley, and I can't for the life of me think of the other two were.
Yeah, it's Leeds, Forest, Southampton, Leicester and Burnley took it up.
Yeah, so they were obviously questioning at the time, and had this point deduction been in place last season, because it's sort of dragged on, I think, about 18 months, this sort of investigation, then Leicester especially would have been safe, considering they finished 2 points behind Everton last season and went down. So the likes of clubs like Leicester, Southampton, who went down obviously last season also, sort of seeking compensation, and I don't know how much they would be entitled to should they win that case. But yeah, it would be, if this point deduction had been enforced last season, Leicester especially would have been safe. And I know Burnley was sort of pressing on with charges like 12 months ago. Now they're back up in the Premier League. Will they keep adding their name to it? Who knows? I don't know where the Nottingham Forest situation arises, because, they only came into the league last season, and they survived and they're still in the Premier League. So I'm not sure where that this comes from.
I think it was that Everton got charged in March, and then there were people saying it needs to be sorted by the end of the season, and then they realised like this commissioner said there's no chance because there's so much information that we've got to go through. It's going to take us way longer than that, and then if there's an appeal, that'll take even more. So you're not going to get a decision this season, that kind of thing. But this thing was 9th of May, when these other clubs were basically told that they can't join themselves into this action by the Premier League against Everton, to kind of say, what about us? Other than once it's all been done, then there will be a position where they can actually sue. So I'm guessing 9th of May, all those clubs were, we didn't know who was going to go down, did we? If Everton survived, we didn't know for sure who was going to go down, maybe at 9th of May, I'm trying to remember. So that's, that's my thinking. Yeah. So I reckon that's why they were in there at that point, because they're saying, well,
it could have potentially went.
Could be us. And let's face it, at that point in time, they're still fighting for survival against a team that has basically spent loads and loads of money on players. The fact it's messed up, because that's what's even funnier. It is, like City, totally wrong. Chelsea, totally wrong. If they're using money the wrong way, if they're breaching the rules, and then as a result they're getting success, well, not Chelsea now, but certainly under the last guy, straight away you think that's bad. But then it's bad with Everton, and then you look at where they are. The money, they've actually got worse since they got the money. That is, only Everton could do that probably. It's unreal. It just feels like, and that's another thing actually, just thinking, when we're talking about Abramovich, there's been talk that stuff's been discovered about links between him. They found some sort of, I saw some newspaper report the other day, so I'm not sure how truth it is, but they've uncovered that there's got some links between him and another company, and they found that there might have been more money kind of getting funneled incorrectly between, in and out of Chelsea, that kind of went under the radar, that suggests that maybe they, maybe they broke the rules in the past even more than they've let on. Not to mention what they're spending now under this guy that's come in. But the other thing that I thought was interesting out of this judgment was just to, they're talking about the sanctions and the Ukraine war and the effect it's had on them. But if that hadn't happened and they'd got the money off him, that feels a bit like Man City suddenly having, the national airline of the country that they're owned by suddenly becoming big sponsors. And, for a long time, City sponsors were people that damn well wouldn't have paid that much to sponsor any other Premier League team. If Everton, if that naming rights thing was a viable option, was a reasonable offer, was that something that, that any reasonable company would want to take out because they thought that was good value to have those naming rights for that stadium? not being funny, they'd have had someone else jumping in. They might have got it for a bit less, but they'd have had someone else jumping in. They found no one, as far as I can tell, which again starts making you think, well, how clean was their money?
Yeah, and even the rumoured takeover is a 777 group, which sounds like a betting firm. Yeah. Apparently this outcome of a point deduction and these factors were taken into account during, the process of, their application, which is, don't know why it's yet to be ratified. And if you look at the portfolio of clubs that ownership group have got, it's hardly a shining success in terms of what they've done with those clubs, and I think there's a lot of sort of disharmony. It'd probably be the best word in the fans of those clubs in terms of how they've been ran and the situations that them clubs have ended up in. I mean, I know Sevilla is one of them. A Europa League stalwart, and if you would have asked most people to pinpoint where are Sevilla in the La Liga table over the last 2 seasons, you probably would have said somewhere around the top 6. But realistically, last season they were fighting relegation, and this season they haven't really started too well, because players have been sold off to balance the books in abbreviated quotation marks, and yeah, they don't sound like the best sort of ownership group, and if that's the best you can get because nobody else basically wants to touch it, it doesn't really bode well. You're sort of jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire, as the saying goes, in terms of I think it's very clear and evident now that Mashiri was the puppet who was being played by Usmanov in terms of the financials and the whole Mersey billionaires sort of tagline that we see, and the liver birds without blue and all that business. Once Usmanov's financial avenues were sort of curtailed, and his allegiances with certain people is probably the best way to put it. Were sort of led to the point that he couldn't continue in what he was doing in England. Mashiri did go really quiet. Everton's sort of financial muscle has tightened even more in terms of what they can do. And then this ownership group that don't sort of strike here as the most profitable in terms of what they do and how they operate. And in one way, you might even say, part of it is asset stripping in terms of taking the best players and selling them off, and they don't overly invest in other clubs. Now, maybe, the clubs that they've got leagues in aren't the most profitable, but the Premier League, it contains a lot of money, but it also loses a lot of money. It doesn't really bode well for them. And there has been times when, we've said in the past, it'd be funny. Like we quite enjoy Everton to go down, because of, certain things that you hear from their fans and fan base. But, you kind of, on the other hand, do fear that if they did actually go, they'd all blame, the points deduction if they went this season. That was the handicap that they had, and that stopped them sort of staying in the league. But, if they do go down, can they financially actually survive and get back up? You would actually wonder if they can, because, the ones who are meant to be coming in don't seem like the best sort of ownership group for what they actually want to do.
No, and the thing is, like, they can't just keep throwing money at the problem. That's the sort of irony of it all. They're in trouble because they've spent more money than they've had coming in, so they've made a loss. They're not selling enough tickets, they're not selling enough merchandise. I've always thought, to be honest with you, that Everton, it's a sign of how badly the club's been run, that they seem to be the last so-called big club, and they call themselves a big club, and get where that comes from, because they're one of the sort of old established names. They've won leagues in my lifetime at least. So even though I was a kid at the time, basically, it's the idea that they're a quite big club in the Premier League, yet they weren't sort of one of the clubs that people were trying to get their hands on and get money for. They just stayed, and they just stagnated, and I mean, I know we ended up getting Cowboys buying us to begin with and stuff like that. I look at Newcastle, and I know now they've gone and got down the dark side, but they had an owner who bought them and knew that he was going to get a payday at some point, so he hung on, despite, you know, not being popular, because he knew eventually you'd get the cash coming in for that club. And I just don't understand how Everton have just been so slow to kind of get on that gravy boat or get on that train. And in the end, when they've done it, they've ended up with a bad lot. And it's the thing about losing the money is if you go down, you're under the EPL rules then for same kind of thing, same kind of idea, but you're not allowed to make that kind of loss. So, you know, they're gonna have players that are gonna leave for nothing because no one's gonna pay them much money for any players they've got that they're trying to get rid of. They're gonna just, you know, if they're lucky, they'll get a bidding war for the odd one. I mean, Jordan Pickford might be the answer to the problems if they can get money for him, and that's where he might come to. And it just feels like
if Jordan Pickford's the answer, what is the question?
Well, yeah, something about Tyrannosaurus Rex, but you know, it's like I'd just be fuming. I mean, the thing is, they're angry at the Premier League for this, but fucking hell, stop being angry at the wrong people. That's my issue with Everton for so long. It's just been you're always angry at the wrong people. And you know yourself, if you get someone reasonable, a reasonable blue, sat on their own with you, they kind of start agreeing with you, don't they? Then when they're in a group, that it all goes away. But I wish they just, you know, there's part of me that has some fondness for some Evertonians thinks, I wish you just wake up and smell the coffee and start blaming the right people.
I mean, they couldn't smell the books cooking, could they? But yeah, it will just be excuse after excuse, isn't it? And yeah, as we said like many a time, you get one on their own and you get some reasonable conversation. You get them in a group and it's, you know, the mob mentality is probably the best way of putting it. But I don't really know at the moment what more we can add in terms of, you know, what they've done, they've been found guilty of. And, you know, we're all sitting with bated breath and saying, like, you know, now, well, you know, what's happened to the team with 115 charges? You know, because if this is the case, then, you know, the book, you know, and everything else in the library is getting lashed at them because of it. You know, according to all sources, Everton was one charge. But they did what they did, and they've just got to take the medicine. You know, you know, you sort of, you deal with dodgy people, you know, and you'll get your fingers burned. You know, as you say, we found out that in terms of the Cowboys that we had running us for a few years, and it took us a long time to actually get back on our feet and recover from this, and we're in a lot more, you know, stronger position than Everton. That's why I say, like, you know, the fear that if they go down, how long will they stay down for? I don't think it'll be an instant return in terms of getting back to the big time. Or, you know, it could go one or two ways, I think, for them now. As a team, I think, you know, as I say, they've got a week to digest this, and they play Manchester United a week on Sunday as we record this. And, you know, Liverpool-based teams and Liverpool and Everton versus Manchester-based teams and City United, it's never, you know, a half-hearted affair. It is, you know, full-blooded. There's a lot of sort of animosity between the two cities, as much as they're alike, they're very different in very different ways. And the games between any of the teams always have that extra little bit of spice to it. You know, and it'll have even more given, you know, the circumstances what Everton will be in, and, you know, at home at Goodison, will the anger be sort of displaced at the board, which I think we've seen a couple of times last season. You know, there was, you know, protests where they stormed the pitch and, you know, the calls for sack the board and stuff like that. And, you know, maybe this new ownership group will, you know, present a new board and a new change in things. Or if they lose that game, you know, and they go on a bit of a bad run in terms of, you know, results after coming off, you know, let's be careful. They've had a few decent results. I think it's 3 away wins on the spin for them. And, you know, they got themselves up to 14 points, which did get them sort of out of the troubled area, but obviously the point deduction now has left them right back, level bottom with Burnley on 4. But it could go as a motivating siege mentality, and you think, right, that's it, now let's, shut up shop and, let's all be angry with everyone and, use it as a motivator to try and get ourselves out of this. Or he could self-implode, which we've seen several times with Everton, when the ground self-implodes and it just becomes a horrible, nasty environment, and they end up turning on their own, and, it could become really ugly for them. So I think between, the now and probably the New Year period, we've probably got, 7-8 games in the league. Tossed in with that, they've got a Carabao Cup tie against Fulham. Is it Fulham? Yeah, it is Fulham.
Hello, I'm here to annoy you. I'm here to annoy you into listening to more of me and more of others on EPL Index. We don't just have the Anfield Index stuff. We've got EPL Index as well, which covers the entirety of the Premier League. And we have 3 podcasts and a whole bunch of really good writing on EPLindex.com. The podcasts are my own Two-Footed podcast, which is every day at 4 p.m, Monday through Friday, covering the whole league. We have A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. You know Tadiwa, he does Anfield Index. He presents A Tad Predictable before every Premier League match week. And then Kevin De Vries and his crew on the EPL Roundtable, they're every week after the Premier League match week. So make sure you listen to everything we're doing on EPL Index and follow us there on Twitter at EPL Index. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Where that could be their answer, as they get through that and they got the semi-final and they get a few results, things will start to seem rosy again. But if they go on the cup and they have a few bad results in the league and they sort of find themselves at Christmas time still in the bottom 3, it could become nasty for them. And you do sort of fear that, how far will this go, and will they just spiral out of control?
Yeah, and I think the timing of it is in a way has worked for them, because 4 or 5 games ago when we were looking at them and thinking, God, they're struggling here, and they've managed to just get enough results and not just that, enough performances in, I think, to feel hopeful. And I'll be, fair play to the manager. He's the kind of manager you probably want when you're down at that end of the table. This is the realisation that they may be coming to accept now, that they're not a top 8 side at the moment. What they need to do now is get themselves to be, if they can, to be away from relegation and to not be near relegation again. And then when they've done that for a while, maybe think about top 8. But I heard another thing as well, that someone was saying that one of the sort of appeals he might be putting forward in a quick one, and I don't know if this was just someone guessing, but was from to have this thing about the deduction being immediate, was to say, can we have it suspended until the appeal's been decided? Personally, if I was them, I'd say leave it on there now, because that now, then you know what you're fighting with at the worst. You know where you are in the table at worst case scenario. If then you win your appeal and your points deduction changes, then you can you've got a brilliant boost. That's far better than get themselves to a point where they're feeling quite safe, and then all of a sudden the 10 points becomes 12 because the appeal backfires on them. So for their sake, I'd say, look, just take it on the chin, see how you get on with the appeal, learn from it, and see what goes on. Okay, that was probably more about Everton than we've ever done on one show, and that's more attention than we should give them. But I think it's important because it's something to us. I'd be interested to see how many other clubs are sort of close to that limit, because it is kind of based over 3 years. So if you do make a loss 1 year, you can kind of catch it back up again the next year and things. So it'd be interesting just to see how close other clubs have been and how far away from it. I reckon City have put themselves forward as being within the guidelines, but then it's been because they've claimed all kinds of things as being something that they aren't really. But we'll see. The other reason Everton got a lot of talk this time is because it's an international break. As we record this, it looks like England are winning 1-0 thanks to an own goal. But they've got Trent. So I've had a mixed feeling about internationals this week, because I hate England playing and wrecking our players, because that's basically what they've done for years. And maybe that's what they're doing with Trent tonight. Maybe we'll see some highlights and see that maybe Trent's playing well, and they're not sort of playing him badly. Normally they like to play. I always remember he always used to play Gerrard further back than Lampard, and I used to think they were always like muting what Gerrard could do. But I didn't watch him that closely, so maybe I was wrong. But the other side to the international breaks this week, though, is some of our other players have done well. And, I don't know, one of the highlights of the season so far was seeing Luis Diaz score twice, but not mention as yet who he scored. We have to mention who he scored against, but he scored twice, and he was in front of his dad, and it was just really emotional. And I hate the international stuff here, but you can tell when you see Luis Diaz, you can see, where people are proud of their country, what it means.
Yeah, I think I seen the video this morning. I got up for work early, dark, cold, wet. Welcome to Liverpool in the winter. I'm sure Diaz is getting slightly more warmer weather where he is. And I said, you will not see a better video on the internet today. Probably this week. You might see some amazing goals in football over the international weekend, but as wholesome a video as it is, for Everton, that lad has been through it, and we touched on last week, I think, because it was roughly a day or so after his father's release. That lad has been, and his family have been through absolute hell and torture. Emotions must have been absolutely drained, and you could see, at times, the goal against Luton, at the time when his dad was still in captivity, how much it meant to him emotionally. He was holding back the tears, and how much the team have rallied around us, and we said last week, it's sort of just a Scouse mentality to things. He's struggling. Let's put an arm around him and give him a G up and do what we can for him. But I'm sure he couldn't wait to get on that plane, with all due respect, and get back to Colombia and actually see, his dad, alive, well, safe, in company of friends and family and people who love him dearly. And those scenes, it was almost as though a script couldn't be written any better. The greatest team in world international football in Brazil, and Luis Diaz scores 2 and beats them. And, you could see he looked absolutely bereft of sort of any emotion left in him. And the scenes, his dad couldn't actually stand on his own 2 feet. He was that emotionally drained as well from the event. But, it's a joy to see how much football means to people. And, as we say, we're recording this while England are playing, and I have got it on the background, and Trent's been in for some heavy treatment. We need to take a leaf out of some of Pep Guardiola's players' books and say, actually, what? Can't be 100% here. I might need to go off and just rest. We might have a bigger fish to fry rather than Malta. But yeah, international football, especially to the Latin and South American countries, it means a hell of a lot. The term football is life is basically what it means. Them, it's religion and everything. And to see him on the score sheet was a joy. And we can probably say, if Alisson's going to concede 2 goals, let them concede those 2 goals. As good as a keeper as Alisson Becker is, I think probably maybe 1% in the back of his mind, he's probably thinking, I don't mind because it's Lewis and he deserves everything he sort of gets at the moment. And we can maybe move it across to the other parts of South American football where Alexis McAllister didn't have such a good night, but our own Darwin Núñez did. And if you've not managed to see his goal, it was a very cool, composed finish, broke from his own half, 1-on-1 with the keeper. And, there's been times when we've seen with Darwin Núñez that, he can sort of rush into things or smash the ball too hard, but it was a lovely, composed finish, put it through the keeper's legs. And, they ran out 2-0 winners in Argentina as well. So big result for Uruguay there. And to see our lads going away and doing well for the countries is always a positive. The only fear you'd have is, injuries, but going away and getting goals under the belt and seeing them perform, it can only spell positive news for us, because we are going to need every player that we've got fit and available to us after this international break, because the games are going to come thick and fast, and they mean a hell of a lot.
I think one good thing about the international break as well is that, I mean, practice makes perfect and all the rest of it, but, if scoring goals is the same as riding a bike that once you know how to do it, you can't stop then. Maybe we don't need to worry, but it's good that Mo Salah's been able to keep playing so he doesn't forget how to score goals, and he's been there. He's proven he's not forgotten.
Oh, sorry, was that Harry Kane?
No.
No, sorry. No, what it is, Harry Kane has literally just dived and been booked. I've just lost train of thought there as I looked up.
He doesn't get away with it, does he, in front of other referees?
No, for some reason, I don't know where this referee's from. It's at Wembley, and Harry Kane's been booked for diving and didn't get a penalty. I would argue he's left his foot dragged along the floor and tried to initiate contact. But yeah, I was sort of sad. Apologies, who was you referring to? Because I was sidetracked by that moment there.
It was the player I reckon is better than Harry Kane, and that's Mo Salah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how many goals would Mo Salah get in Germany in a Bayern Munich team? I would love to know, because it's being fed for Harry Kane there, and he may go on to break all sorts of records for Bayern Munich in Germany. He might not even win a trophy, but he probably will. And I'm sure it'll all be worth it for him. But Mo Salah, it tends to be the old quotation mark, only Mo Salah, isn't it? Or compared to Mo Salah. And we've said that with Van Dijk. That was the benchmark for who defenders were compared against. It, like only Van Dijk, or without Virgil van Dijk, this player would be, top of all defensive rankings. And yeah, Mo bagged himself 4 goals. With all due respect to Djibouti, I don't think that the powerhouse of African football, I don't think I'll be having a couple of quid on him to win the AFCON, put it that way. But he goes out there and he carries his team, gets 4 goals, and he keeps his sharpness up. And quietly this season, he's racking up the numbers. I think he's 200 goals now in English football. There's 198 of them for Liverpool, 2 of them, sadly, for the team in West London who play in Royal Blue, who aren't the most cleanest. But I imagine there won't be many more games before Mo Salah has racked up 200 goals for Liverpool, and that's some achievements. In a time when he joined us, he was, 25, 26 years of age. He's not spent his whole career at Anfield, and he's putting up numbers like that. And the word legend will probably be used for so many players, but this fella, he's putting himself up there as a legendary player. And I've got a funny feeling there may have been a few whispers about social media this week that Mo Salah might be in line for a new deal. And I think we said in the summer, when the Saudi links were all up there, I think he's going to have a little look at the Saudi league and think, is it really worth it? Because there's another fella in an England shirt tonight who's probably actually regretting his decision to go out there, because, sometimes playing in front of less than 1,000 people and, not really having a decent standard of football, which then means, when you play international football, which isn't the highest standard anyway, especially in qualifiers, that you're not actually standing out and looking overly physically fit. It's maybe something that he considers and thinks, what, I'm Mo Salah, I'm only 32 years of age, I've got years left, and why not stay at this club, because this club's going places.
Yeah, and he's had some slaggings this season. I mean, there have been games where he's not been brilliant all the way through the game, and I get people's point where they sort of have a bit of a moan about him. But the bottom line is that your strikers are there to score goals, and that's, if they're doing that, then you can't complain. It's when they're not doing that you start really looking at the other stuff that they do in a game, and you think, right, okay, you didn't score, but first line of defence, or look at all the assists that they've got, or whatever. So to me, if they're scoring the goals, then you don't really need to kind of complain too much about the other stuff that's going on. Unless they're losing possession and you're losing goals all the time because of them, as they're wasting time or whatever else. There's occasionally reasons to have a go, but he's not been bad enough to anyone to really, really get annoyed with him. It's just, I think Siri's listening to me. Sorry, just trying to stop Siri from answering. It's just enjoy what you get out of him, and we get so much out of him, and then in Liverpool's case, there's 4 other lads sort of all vying for the front 3 positions. Four other decent lads that would probably get into any other team in the Premier League without any questions. Who are fighting, and so we've got this competition. They're all learning from each other. Like Darwin, as you just mentioned, at the other end of the scale age-wise, got all loads of his career still ahead of him. But I still think Mo's got a long time in him. People look at his age and start making assumptions. It's almost as if there's this kind of like little bit of an AI thing that goes on that says, right, find a player, find his age, right, decide what we're going to say. Oh, he's that age, is he? Right, well, he must be looking to leave then. Must be looking for a big payday somewhere to finish his career. I could see Mo playing another 5 years in the Premier League, the way he just seems to be unbelievably fit. Maybe that's going to change, but and of course sometimes it does happen with players that it doesn't sort of happen gradually, it can happen suddenly. To me, there's not even the slightest sign of him aging.
No, I think the only thing you could maybe say is he's not got the electric pace. But, he's not exactly a slouch. He's going to win a foot race against most people. I just think he's ever so slightly lost that maybe, first 4 or 5 yards of electric burst where you can get away from players. But he's so clever, and 99.9% of the time his touch is unreal. You know what I mean? Like he is a player, who can bring the ball down from anywhere, and he can kill it dead. And that's an art. That's a skill to be able to do that. There may be a fact that he goes ever so slightly more centrally as he ages, and hopefully he ages at Liverpool and he stays around, because he is ruthless. He does miss chances. Let's not kid ourselves here. He's not the best finisher at the club. I think Diogo Jota is probably the most natural, clinical finisher at the club, but Mo Salah gets himself in so many good positions and gives himself so many opportunities to actually finish goals. He's always going to get on the end of things, and I think we've kind of missed, for me, the old Mo Salah cut inside and bend one into the top corner to become one of them else, and in a week or so's time that'd be lovely. But I think we've seen with Brentford, his link-up play with Darwin is exceptional at the moment, and I think it's 7 or 8 assists now that Darwin's got an English football, and every single one of them has been from Mo Salah. And as much as we praise Darwin's link-up play, because it's actually getting so much better, and the evidence will also see, I think that was probably one of his best games last weekend against Brentford in the number 9 position. But his ability to, put it on a plate for Mo and basically said to him, here's what you've got to do with that ball. And Mo Salah doesn't need asking twice what to do with the football when he's in front of goal. And yeah, I think he's got a hell of a lot more that he can bring to the game. And I hope that I think he is wise enough to know that if he went to Saudi right now, it's only for a payday. It's for nothing more. Like, literally, the level of football out there, it is far, far substandard to what he's going to get in the English Premier League. And, all being well, as we are this season, we're playing very well. We're second in the league. I think we joint top on points with Man City.
Yeah.
We're
a point behind us.
Point behind them now, sorry, yeah. After the 4-4 with Chelsea. Then, we're putting ourselves in a very strong position to be back in the Champions League next season, and we could even get there de facto by winning the Europa League, which we've said would be, a lovely tonic as the one trophy that Jurgen doesn't have. But this team's going places, so why would you want to leave?
Yeah, and I think, it's too. I mean, the Saudi league, it just feels like, I don't know, it's where people who aren't good enough for the MLS go, and that's, not being disrespectful to the MLS, but it's a league because of the way the rules are that you can get a star player and then salary caps kind of kick in and things. But they want the star players in the MLS that are going to help them win things. And I don't know, I just feel like some of the people who've gone to Saudi are kind of maybe want to go in the MLS. Maybe I'm being harsh. I've not even watched any of it, and I don't think many people have either. It's just like you've almost gone out of our sight, out of mind. We don't really know what you're doing, and that's maybe some parts of the world more people are going to watch it, but it just feels like it's a nothing league. It's just a load of money, sort of a rich men's plaything. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I just get the feeling it's going to sort of fizzle out over the next couple of years, and no one's going to be looking back and thinking about themselves as being the pioneers of this amazing league that is now sort of world famous and everyone wants to be in it. That's just not going to happen, I don't think. And of course, I'm glad it didn't happen in the summer. Not that I ever thought it would, but yeah, we needed him, didn't we? On Sunday against Brentford, we were. I don't know. It was a quiet game in more ways than one. And it just felt to me like, I'm not saying it felt like we were threatened by them, but they did have a couple of moments, Brentford. But again, it just felt like the same thing where we're sort of going into these games thinking we've already won before we have. And thankfully, we kind of got the message in the end that, no, you don't just automatically win. You've got to do something. I don't know if I'm being a bit harsh on them, but I didn't feel like we were great, at least for the first, say, half hour of that game.
Yeah, I think we mentioned where the threat was with Brentford. It was, the wide positions and the attackers in Mbeumo and Visser. Mbeumo especially is an impressive player, and strangely enough, I was with many other people in thinking that fella was a lot older than what he is, but somehow he's only 24. But maybe he needs to grow his hair because he seems to look, the back end of 20s, early 30s in his physical appearance. But he is lightning fast, in reference to, Mo Salah, like Brian Mbeumo is lightning. I've not seen many players faster than Virgil van Dijk, but that lad certainly is at times. And we knew what we had to do, we faced a few teams like that at Anfield this season, and I think that's 9 wins from 9 in all competitions, and each one has been by 2 goals or more. So it's not a bad record that we're having at home. And yes, maybe the complacency aspect is there, that we take things for granted that we are just going to do enough and get past these teams, and maybe we've carried that into away games. You think, with all due respect to Brighton, we should have been a level above Brighton, but we didn't get the win there, and no respect to Luton after their sort of antics, but we should have wiped the floor with Luton, and maybe the complacency factor got the best of us, hence why we dropped points in those 2 away games. But it does feel like there's a little aura once more about Anfield, and the fact that we will just do enough. And I think, hopefully we are just fine-tuning and getting to the point that when big performances are needed, when bigger teams do come to Anfield, more nearer to the Christmas period, and after the turn of the year, and hopefully European ties that mean a lot more, than getting out of the group stage, and potentially maybe cup ties further down the line in domestic competitions. Potentially semi-final on the cards if we get past West Ham in the Carabao, which I think is the last season of 2 legs now. Then we'll ramp things up. And yeah, there's been a conversation about the atmosphere at Anfield, and I know where I sit can be a kind of a skewed judgment, because sitting in the middle of the Kop, it's the heartbeat of where all the songs begin. But there's a bit of chatter now about the atmosphere around Anfield, and you yourself was there on Sunday in the main stand, so you got to experience it yourself, and what's your view on that now?
It's just how it feels like, and it feels like it's worse at league games, and I don't know whether, I've always had this theory as well, that everyone has these theories. I sort of have a feeling that there's so many people sort of sat around sort of just set in the ways and not really making an effort, and like you're saying, the Kop is the heart and soul of the ground, undoubtedly so. But up in the main stand as well, you can't always hear the back of the Kop. It sounds mad, but I know just from talking to different people at different games, like when you're up in the main stand, the back of the Kop's almost like you can't hear it. The roof is kind of over the top of the people making the most noise, if that makes sense. It used to be kind of as big as the rest of the ground, didn't it? I don't know whether we can do anything about that, but that's obviously not the answer to all the problems. Is that the way it should be? Is like the Kop get it going, and then it's infectious. The back of the Kop kicks it off, and it works its way around the ground. And I've been to games down the years where you've almost had like competing noise where, kind of like the Annie Road end, they're trying to sing one song and the Copper trying to sing another, and you're in the middle with these waves of noise coming over, and you're waiting to see which one wins out. And so many songs just get going and then die. I feel like there's a lot of people don't know the songs. I think he's wrong to kind of sort of blame it on day trippers as well, because there's people all around you not singing who are local, The people who want to sing just don't seem... To me, it's so hard for people to get tickets where you sit in a group with your mates. If you're lucky and you've had a season ticket for years and you're with your mates, great. But I wonder how many people have got a season ticket and they kind of sat with someone that, they don't mind, they get on with, but it's not like... It's not the best mate. You know what I mean? It's like when you're in a group with other people that you know really well, you're more extrovert, aren't you? You're more loud, you're more noisy. When you're with some strangers, you're more likely to think, well, see if they sing first. He's not singing, I'll be quiet. I just think there's an element to that. And there's also an element of this thing where, like, when I'm talking about the players being complacent, you sort of think, are the players waiting for the crowd to get them going? But then the crowd, are they thinking, we're waiting for the players to get us going? Just forget about it. Just get it going yourself. Whatever your bit is, you're on the pitch, get the crowd going. If you're in the crowd, get the players going. Just no one seems to do. And, we were talking just before we came on about how hard it is to bring stuff into the ground now. I'm not saying you'd want to bring stuff, but you can only bring a really small bag unless it's a bag from the club shop, which kind of, says a lot about, I don't know, as if the football's like an afterthought. That's how it's starting to feel at times. And I don't know, it's just, I don't know how we can fix it, but maybe more of the safe standing. I don't know.
I think, isn't it the same, like football product? Is a term you often hear these days, the product of the game and stuff like that. And, the entertainment factor,
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, mag boxes, and games consoles. Visit LibertyShield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
You can't even get a bottle of Coke into the ground, we were saying about this before the game, you can't, rock up and say, I just want to bring the, bottle of Coke, or, you've had a rough night before, you want to bring, your bottle of water and something like that to keep yourself hydrated, and you'll be told no at the turnstile, because they want you to buy the stuff, in their own merchandise stores in the ground. And yes, you can bring in bags that are from the club shop, but, who's to say that, you might not have nipped into the city centre and picked up, something else, and you reference, it's not always day trippers, but, day trippers might actually go into the city and stop in the city for a night and then go to the game the next day and, maybe do a spot of shopping, or they might have come to a game which is a 5:30 kickoff and come up for the day and gone for a spot of lunch or something in the city centre, and, they popped into a shop to buy, a jacket or anything like that, and, what are you supposed to do with those bags? You know what I mean? They're being overly critical about what you're bringing, and I understand there's a safety aspect into what can be brought into a football stadium, of course there is. But, it does feel as though, it's being attention's been directed in the wrong sort of areas. And yes, as you said, it's sort of like the chances of getting tickets are slim, and getting tickets, sat with your friends and people you feel, comfortable around to be, ever so slightly more vocal, is even slimmer again. And I do think the club needs to address, ways to try and improve the atmosphere. And I'm sure, there's millions of Liverpool fans out there, and every single one will have their own opinion on things. I've seen, references, getting the old boys' pen sort of back together in terms, allowing, the younger generation to get into the ground and all sit together. Because let's be honest here, children of a younger generation, enthusiastic going to the game, are likely to make noise and are likely to, get things going a bit more, and maybe then that will, trigger, more people to then be loud and enthusiastic as well. But I don't know, but something does need to be done, because, I reckon people mock us for the old myth of the Anfield atmosphere, and at times we haven't really got a leg to stand on because it can be quite poor. But on the flip side of that, we've seen, Barcelona, Manchester City, Dortmund, you go back years again to like Chelsea in the Champions League, Juventus, these huge ties where arguably the crowd won us the game and they had teams rattled. And, to turn up for maybe 2 or 3 games a season to do that, yeah, it's good and it might get us over the line. But there is times when we also do need that to work in your regular run-of-the-mill league games, because, we have seen, okay, we're on a good run at the moment, but we can go flat and we can drop points. And, maybe those times when you look back, you think, what, maybe we had that odd draw at home when, everyone couldn't be bothered and it was sort of a bit of a dull atmosphere, and we romped away with a 1-1 draw to, Burnley or West Brom or something. You might think, if we'd have just done a little bit more altogether, we might have got 3 points and things might have been ever so slightly different.
Yeah, like if you sort of like, you had a spare ticket and someone who's never been to Anfield before but had heard all about it was like in the area, maybe you knew him through work or family or whatever, and there was a chance to take him to the game. I mean, there's some games you take him and you'd be thinking, God, please don't ask me about why it's so quiet. You think this isn't Anfield. This isn't the Anfield we sell to everybody. We tell them what it's like. And it does. It feels like, I mean, there were quiet games when I went years and years and years ago in the 80s. There were games then when it was quiet and, people couldn't be arsed and things. I mean, the 12:30 kickoffs don't help nowadays. But, you did get times like that. But it does feel like it's getting worse and worse. And when I say I don't think it's day trippers as well, is because I think sometimes the day trippers are the ones that they've come all that way, whether it's a one-off or an occasional trip. They spent a fortune. They put everything into being there. They're not kind of thinking that they're coming to watch a show. They're coming to be a part of a show and they get involved. I think sometimes it's the ones that's going every week, able to go every week, sort of almost taking it for granted that, I don't know, you kind of look around the stand, in any stand, and you'll see someone sort of sat there with their arms folded, sat back, waiting for something to happen, waiting for something to moan about. And I don't know, maybe we've got too many of them. The idea of having the kids in the boys' pen and stuff again, I mean, I get where that's coming from, and that is one of the biggest issues in the game now as well. Is when I started going the game, I could go off on my own, spend a couple of quid or whatever it was at the time, watch a game, come home. I could go with my mates. We could all just decide to go on the day. There was no need to have it booked well in advance. You just turned up, queued up, got in, watched the game. And the other thing as well is you queuing up. So rather than being like now where everyone's in the pub to the last possible minute and goes in at the last possible chance they can, that you were in the ground. I mean, I used to be queuing up with a mate at, say, 12 o'clock for a 3 o'clock kickoff. We'd get let in at about maybe 1 o'clock. By 3 o'clock, my God, we were ready for that game. The atmosphere had been building and building and building all the way up to it. Nowadays, you get in the ground at 2:45 on a 3 o'clock kickoff and it's half empty, isn't it? The seats are half empty, partly because some are sat probably having corporate meals, and partly because some are still in the pub or queuing up to get in because they've left it till late in the pub. But then, what do we offer people inside who want to drink? We offer them overpriced, fizzy, weird ale that you wouldn't You know, you'd send it back if you were in town, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, or very weird smelling hot dogs.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, which, you know, I mean, if you like hot dogs, fine. You know, you do you, but there is no weirder smell than when someone wafts past you with one of their hot dogs.
One hot dog for one person can, like, infect 100 people with its smell, can't it?
Oh, my word, they're awful. Yeah, and, you know, if you do fancy a beer, I think the options, off the top of my head, I think, in the Cop anyway, a bottles of Carlsberg, and, you know, with all due respect, it's probably not the best lager in the world. And occasionally San Miguel, depending on what bar you're at. Or a Summersby cider, again, plastic bottled. So, you know, and of course, you're not allowed to drink them within view of the pitch, which is hence why so many people spend so long on a concourse, to the point of you never walk alone. You'll see people dashing up the stairs, and,
yeah,
you know, you can be 5-6 minutes into a game and, you know, there'll be empty seats around you, or, you know, people squeezing past, you know, because, you know, they've been either caught outside because they've left it too late, as you say, to get in, and the process of getting in is a farce. But that's a whole different topic of discussion. But yeah, the club aren't doing too much in terms of offering what they are in the ground, and, you know, as we've said many a time, it's not cheap to go to the game. I think, you know, in the Cop, an average price ticket is somewhere around 40 to 45 quid, and you're in one of the new stands, you know, the main stand, or when eventually it is open, the Anfield Road. I imagine you're going to be paying £50 upwards, just for your entry ticket alone. That's without, you know, the cost of any sort of food and drink in there, and obviously how you get to the ground as well. You know, you could be looking at, you know, upwards of, you know, 70, 80 quid in terms of, you know, how do you get to the ground, you know, maybe a bite to eat and a drink or two in the ground plus your entry ticket. You know, it's not a cheap day out, and, you know, we've said before, it's not a time of, you know, real profitability in people's lives. You know, it's a time of hardship, and, you know, I've always said it's a privilege to get to go to the game, you know, and, you know, you can at times take it for granted, but then you do see, you know, that what people will do. You know, they might only ever get to Anfield once, and it is like a sort of, you know, a lifetime achievement to get there. And, you know, what people would love to do to actually go to the game. And if ever you can't make it, if you've got a spare ticket, you know, it doesn't hang around for long. People will give anything to try and get there and see them. So yeah, maybe we all just need to take a little bit more responsibility for our own actions, and when we do get into the ground, and try and give that extra 5%, because, you know, I'm sure, as we've said, if the crowd give an extra 5-10%, I'm sure it does inspire the players, and then it comes in turn, you know what I mean, the players will start performing better, and it just then, you know, snowballs into all, hopefully, a positive effect.
Yeah, I mean, one of the strangest things I saw as a Liverpool fan, luckily enough, I was really lucky to be over in Melbourne for the one of the friendlies we had out there, and in the MCG, the Melbourne Cricket Ground, they started playing You'll Never Walk Alone. And I mean, apart from a small slither of sort of Melbourne local fans supporting their team, it was all Liverpool fans. But then they put the words to You'll Never Walk Alone up on the big screen, and it just felt weird. I'm thinking, why do you need to do that? But for some of the other songs, I think some of the people don't know the words, and maybe, as awful as it is to admit it, maybe we need to just find ways of helping people to learn those words. And another thing I think as well is, there's this tendency to kind of tell other people off for not being good enough fans. So, you know, you hear this so much in so many different ways. You know, what's the perfect fan? I mean, I don't know what one is. To me, a perfect fan doesn't exist, but a fan who sort of shouts at everybody else all the time and really talks down to them and all the rest of it isn't really the kind of fan that's going to encourage others to kind of join in with him. So maybe rather than shouting at fans to make more noise, we need to sort of, you know, encourage them rather than tell them off, and explain to them why it's needed, and, you know, just try and cajole them into getting involved. I don't know. It's just, I do find it hard though. We've just said, I mean, Liverpool have these tendencies. Like the other day, I noticed it, and it felt like the whole experience was taking your time. There's no rush. It's only Brentford. And you can guarantee that if we were playing City that day, that we would be straight out of the blocks as players, trying to get at them, trying to win the game. Might die off after a bit if it's not working out, don't get me wrong, but straight from the off, we're trying to win it. And so are the fans. And like you say, it's like, every game matters, because that could be the game that by the end of the season you look back on and think, shit, if we'd have got that win instead of a draw, we'd have won the league. So it's just trying to get us in there. But I think just maybe trying to encourage each other. And if it is anything to do with people not knowing the words, no better way for it to be demonstrated than when Paul Tierney got one of the decisions wrong straight away. 3 words, everyone knew 3 words to the song, everyone knew them, they knew the tune, they knew the words.
Yeah, I think it was one of the first things you messaged me after. We did question the appointment of that fella, and yeah, I don't think he got too much wrong. But his card's marked as a referee with Klopp and with the Liverpool fan base, and it didn't take much for him to get a warm welcome. It's probably the best way of putting it, and keeping it less colourful than the language that was used inside the ground. But then on the flip side, he didn't actually send Endo off in what I thought was a correct decision. Football is a contact game, and just looking back on the decision, it was a 50-50. He went in, he won the ball, and once he'd won the ball, he did pull his legs back. We didn't go through with any malice and leave a leg in there to injure a player. And the other player also, I think it was Jensen, went in full-blooded, but then, when the ball was gone, they sort of both pulled the legs back ever so slightly. And I think, Tierney got that one right, and, he was roundly serenaded, and I'm sure that's probably made his weekend, and probably his whole week, to be quite honest, unless he's got any sort of international or domestic duty to referee this week. The thank you Tierney, was actually one of the things you probably won't ever hear at Anfield ever again.
No, I don't even think, I was trying to think, like, do we even hear referees get their actual names sung that often? It's normally like, a reference to where they're from, given the fact that most of the referees that we get are from Manchester. He got his name sung. He actually got his name sung. I mean, that is, I don't know, you can imagine it being like this. I don't know, there'd be some kind of like a blue plaque or something goes up, or red plaque or whatever they have at referee HQ down at PGMOL. I don't know whether that'll sort of bring in good books or bad books with Howard Webb, because I bet Howard Webb's jealous as hell. He never got that, did he? He tried his hardest against us.
Yeah. We had this discussion today actually about referees, and it was, the quotation is, referees shouldn't be seen or heard, they should just be there. For a decision needs to be made one way or the other. Which way does a throw-in go, which way does a corner go, or whatever, stuff like that. But referees nowadays are making themselves headlines, and the fact that we know, so much about referees isn't a good thing. And yeah, Tierney getting his name sung in person, not like the referees or whatever, as you'll often hear. If you play lower league bingo in terms of what crap they're singing. But the fact that his name, is fully referenced, isn't actually a positive. But yeah, I suppose if he gets something right, you've probably got to applaud him. And yeah, it probably hasn't gone down too well with Mr. Webb. I'm wondering if he'll bring out the mic footage of that one. Paul Tierney's response to getting his name sung at Anfield. Yeah,
I'm just waiting for him to start having walk-on music. The refs, that's the next stage, I reckon. With they'll be bigging themselves up that much. And I wonder if he'll be getting the walk-on music if they have any when we play City, because that's our next game. So we'll be back before that. We'll have a look through and a look ahead at what's going on there. We'll talk about what's happened with England. I mean, last time I looked, it was still 1-0. Has anything changed? Let's have a quick look. Don't know why, because if you're listening to this now, it's all over and done with. No, at the moment, 49 minutes, England 1, Malta 0, thanks to an own goal. And England have had 2 shots, none on target, according to the stats that I've just seen here. Yeah. Which tells you a lot, doesn't it?
The actual intrigue of international football, and I've got it on mute as we're watching, and kind of keep an eye just on Trent, really, and what he's doing. He's got a bit of strapping around his left knee because he was getting a bit of heavy treatment earlier on. But yeah, actually seeing Trent do things, and then it cuts to parts of the crowd and they applaud him. And you just think, that's the hypocrisy of international football that I can't buy into. Trent will be absolutely slammed anywhere he goes, every game of the season in a Liverpool shirt. But when he puts an England shirt on, let's all come together and let's support this lad who we've just slagged off and slaughtered and probably called him and his people all sorts.
Yeah.
That is one of the main reasons, amongst other things, that I can't get on board with England. But yeah, we digress. I'm sure they'll probably run out winners, but as long as Trent comes off the pitch injury-free, that's the main thing in our eyes.
Yeah, definitely. That's what we want. When all the players come back safe, we want, one player I don't mind having a good time while he's away is Luis Diaz. I think he's allowed it. But the other lads, just lay easy now on the celebration drinks and get yourselves back ready. Some chaos going on outside.
Sounds like the ambulance there for someone else.
Yeah.
Might be one of Man City's lads.
Yeah, someone's probably fallen asleep watching the game and banged their head. Yeah, I want all our lads to get back all in one piece. Trent especially, needs to sort of say he's feeling a bit of a strain now that he can come home. Because we need them next game, Man City, and we'll be back for that. But as always, thanks to Jay, thanks to you for listening. Sorry if you're an Everton fan, get over it. We will be back soon.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at anfieldindex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.
Sports Social Podcast Network.